We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Amud Beis in Maseches Bab Metzia. This is Bab Metzia Daf 50b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara asked, we know that the halacha is if you have Onah less than a sixth, let's say, for example, the buyer is overcharged, but he's overcharged by less than 1/6, so then the sale goes through. What we call Mechila, the buyer has to be Mochel on the overcharge. But the question of the Gemara was, does that happen immediately, meaning the buyer essentially has no choice but to go through with the sale totally, or do we say, no, the buyer does have some time to show it to his relatives or to his merchants, or to a merchant, and then if he finds out that he was overcharged, he's actually allowed to demand that amount of money that he paid extra, he can demand that back. That was the question of the Gemara. And so the Gemara is in the middle of bringing a proof from the Mishnah. Again, the Mishnah had an opinion of Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon said that Onah is not 1/6, but it's actually 1/3. And the sellers were happy about that because they could overcharge by more now that it was 1/3. And initially they were happy, but then they were not happy with Rabbi Tarfon because Rabbi Tarfon then said that the buyer has the entire day in order to investigate and make sure that he was not overcharged. And so the Gemara now assumes that Rabbi Tarfon's 1/3 is identical to the Rabbanon's 1/6, meaning to say that according to Rabbi Tarfon, whatever the halacha would be less than 1/3 would be exactly the same as what the halacha was according to the Rabbanon when it's less than 1/6. And so the Gemara now says, if you're going to say that there's an immediate mechila if it's less than 1/6 according to the Rabbanon, well, Rabbi Tarfon nami la'alter have a mechila, and you're going to say according to Rabbi Tarfon also, it's an immediate mechila, the sale just goes through if it's less than 1/3, as Rashi says, Rabbi Tarfon nami la'alter have a mechila pachas mishlish, that if he's overcharged, the buyer is overcharged by less than a third, there's a mechila automatically. So now it doesn't really make sense, because Amai Chazru, so why is it that they said, meaning why were the merchants upset, so to speak, with Rabbi Tarfon's opinion, when he said that they have all day, the buyer has all day to retract? Rashi says, Amai Chazru, Hakol Hayom de Rabbi Tarfon bishlish hu amar lehu. In other words, when Rabbi Tarfon said that he has all day, that's if it's 1/3. But if it's less than a third, so then there really is no difference. If the overcharge is less than a third, there's going to be a mechila, the lokach has to go through with it, and it has to be immediate. And again, according to the Rabbanan, less than 1/6, he has to go through with it. So therefore, what's the big deal that the person has all day at 1/3? That's only at 1/3 that he has all day. All they have to do is be careful not to do onah of a third. Anything less than a third, they're going to be good. And everything will be mechila li'alter, and the sale will go through. Why would they be upset about that? If you're going to say that it's li'alter, that's really the problem over here. If you're going to say that according to the Rabbanan, less than 1/6, immediately the sale goes through, and according to Rabbi Tarfon, less than 1/3, immediately the sale goes through, it is still a great advantage to hold like Rabbi Tarfon, and that's why the Gemara says, Amai Chazru, why would they change their mind and say they want to go back to the Rabbanan? But Rabbi Tarfon nichelu tvei, it's actually better for them to stick with Rabbi Tarfon. Demai de Rabbanan kamash v'lu onah, because what the Rabbanan are considering to be onah, meaning 1/6, let Rabbi Tarfon have a mechila. According to Rabbi Tarfon, that's an immediate mechila, and it goes through, so you're for sure better off if you're going with Rabbi Tarfon's opinion. And so the Gemara responds, Misavrid pachas mishlish l'Rabbi Tarfon kepachas mishasus l'Rabbanan dami. Do you really think that at less than a third, according to Rabbi Tarfon, it's identical to less than a sixth according to the Rabbanan? Meaning the whole basis of the proof is that when it's less than a third according to Rabbi Tarfon, immediately the sale goes through, there's an immediate mechila. But that's not really true. Lo no, mishasus v'yad shalish, from 1/6 until 1/3, that's an entire range. L'Rabbi Tarfon, according to Rabbi Tarfon, kishasus atzma l'Rabbanan dami, that's the same as 1/6 according to the Rabbanan, meaning at 1/6 according to the Rabbanan. So there we say, let's say the lokach was overcharged by exactly 1/6, that's called onah. And over there again, you have a certain amount of time, the lokach has a certain amount of time there to go back on the sale. And that's the identical thing according to Rabbi Tarfon, all the way from 1/6 to 1/3. So it's not true that at less than 1/3, there's this immediate mechila and the sale goes through. That whole range is identical to what the Rabbanan say by 1/6. But the Gemara says, but if that's the case, if so, b'mai samchu meikar, so why were they happy in the first place? Meaning, according to Rabbi Tarfon, what's Rabbi Tarfon essentially saying? Rabbi Tarfon's not saying that you have 1/3 is onah and less than 1/3 is not onah. He's saying 1/3 is onah, and all the way from 1/3 all the way down to 1/6 is also treated like onah. So why would they ever be happy with what Rabbi Tarfon said? And so the Gemara says maybe the only way to understand that is Tifshot is to answer another question that we had. Tifshot, then you're going to have to answer the bittul mekach l'Rabbanan liolam chozer. You're going to have to say that bittul mekach, according to the Rabbanan, is going to be forever that the lokach is allowed to retract. Meaning to say as follows: according to the Rabbanan, when it's more than 1/6, you're going to have to say that the lokach mekach actually has forever to retract. The Kevan de Amar Lahu, Rabbi Tarfon Havi Ona Samchu. So therefore, when Rabbi Tarfon initially said that it's going to be Ona from 1/6 to 1/3, if it's Ona from 1/6 to 1/3, so then the buyer only has enough time to show to his merchant or to show to his relative. Whereas according to the Rabbanan, if it's more than 1/6, the buyer has forever. The buyer can go back on that deal forever because that's considered bittul mekach. That's considered such a high overcharge that he can say, forget it, I want to go back on the sale. So that's why initially they were happy with Rabbi Tarfon, because instead of the buyer having forever, he just has this very short amount of time. But then when Rabbi Tarfon said to them, Kol hayom chazru, he actually has all day, so it's still not that he has forever, but he has a nice amount of time to retract. So then already chazru, then already they changed their mind, and they said we want to go back to the Rabbanan, because they basically said all days is certainly going to be enough time for the buyer to find out. And Rashi explains, Ki Amar Lu Kol Hayom Chazru. When Rabbi Tarfon said that the buyer has all day, then the merchants, the sellers, they changed their mind. Chada number one, the Bein Liolam Chozru Bein Shos Kol Hayom. The difference between saying that the buyer has forever or he has all day, Hana Por Sehili Didu. That's just a little bit of that's just a small benefit, because having all day is a lot of time. The shows Harbe Yesh Limolech Kol Hayom. That's plenty of time to decide if you have all day. V'yod, and further, Ono Yeser Al Shasus Lo Shchicha. Also, this whole idea of having Ono more than 1/6, that's not very common anyway. So when it comes to the actual exactly 1/6, they actually are losing out. Because again, according to Rabbanan, the buyer just has this short amount of time to show it to other sellers or to show it to his relatives, but according to him, he has all day. And the Gemara continues, if you think that bittul mekach according to the Rabbanan, meaning at more than 1/6 according to the Rabbanan, the buyer does not have forever to do bittul mekach. The buyer doesn't have forever to go back on the sale. Rather, he only has a small amount of time according to the Rabbanan, which is very advantageous again for the sellers. So b'mai samchu, so why would they be happy with Rabbi Tarfon? The fact that Rabbi Tarfon said Una is at 1/3, that doesn't help them at all, because Rabbi Tarfon essentially says the halacha is exactly the same from 1/6 all the way to 1/3. It's an entire range, and therefore Rabbi Tarfon is no better than the Rabbanan. And so the Gemara says, no, it could be that that's not the case. It could be that according to the Rabbanan, the buyer only has a small window of time, and still they were happy with Rabbi Tarfon more than the Rabbanan. Why? Samchu b'shasus atzma. They were happy at exactly 1/6, because Rabbi Tarfon, when he says from 1/6 to 1/3 is considered essentially what the Rabbanan say at 1/6, he doesn't mean from 1/6. He actually means from right above 1/6. To Rabbi Tarfon mechila, because according to Rabbi Tarfon, at exactly 1/6, you're actually still at the level of mechila. The sale still goes through, it's considered to be forgiven. Well, the Rabbanan Onah, but according to the Rabbanan, already at 1/6, it's considered to be Onah. And Rashi explains, Di salka daitach bittul mekach l'Rabbanan, because if you think that by bittul mekach, according to the Rabbanan, meaning by more than 1/6 when the sale is reversed, ke'onah, that it's exactly the same as 1/6 like onah, where you have the same amount of time, bechdei sheyira, meaning you only have the amount of time to show it to the merchant or the relative, v'yein bein onah le'bittul mekach, if that's the case, the only difference between onah and bittul mekach, according to the Rabbanan, would be ela devonah yadu al halyona, that by onah, when it's exactly 1/6, so then the buyer has the upper hand, he can choose whether he wants to just get a little bit of the money back or whether he wants to go back on the sale entirely. By bittul mekach, so the idea is then that both parties can just reverse. The entire sale is just reversed in that case. So if that was the situation, there's not much of a difference between onah and bittul mekach. Ki mashri Rabbi Tarfon lebittul mekach onah. When Rabbi Tarfon turns bittul mekach, instead of saying it's bittul mekach, Rabbi Tarfon's essentially saying it's onah. Ein zu tov lehem. That's not such a great thing for them. That's basically the exact same thing. And the Gemara says, Samchu b'shasos atzma. What they were happy about is they're happy about it at exactly 1/6. When we say that from 1/6 to 1/3 according to Rabbi Tarfon is identical to 1/6 according to the Rabbanan, that doesn't mean at 1/6. That means mishasus v'malo amru. It means from above 1/6 to 1/3. That's the same as 1/6 for the Rabbanan, v'lo shasus atzma, but not the 1/6 itself. Meaning again, according to Rabbi Tarfon, 1/6 is going to be considered to be mechila, whereas according to the Rabbanan, 1/6 is going to be considered ona'ah. And the Gemara continues, they asked the following question. This is the question we just mentioned above. Bittul mekach l'Rabbanan. When we talk about bittul mekach according to the Rabbanan, again, bittul mekach is, let's say, for example, the buyer is overcharged by more than 1/6. So that's called bittul mekach. That essentially means that the sale can be totally canceled, as Rashi just said, by either party. So for how long does that extend? Li'olam choser, does that mean that the sale can be retracted forever? We have forever to undo that sale? Or dilma b'chdei shir l'tagar or l'krovo? Or do we mean to say that that you just have that small amount of time. The buyer can show it to a merchant or show it to his relative, and he can be choser on the mekach, but once that time passes, the sale goes through. And the Gemara says, V'im tipsalom, now if you're going to say, Bechdei sheyir l'tagar or l'krovo, that if all he has is this small amount of time to cancel the sale, so ma'iko bein shasus liyaser al shasus, what's the difference if it's exactly a 6 or if it's more than a 6? In both cases, he has this small window of time. There is a difference. Ika, there is the following difference. The ilu shasus, because if it's exactly a 6 overcharged, misha nisana choser, so then only the person who the ona affected, meaning only the buyer, let's say, if he overpaid, he's the one that can go back on the sale. The ilu yeser al shasus, whereas if the overcharge is more than 1/6, shneim choser, so then both parties can actually go back on the sale. And so the Gemara says, what is the halacha in terms of Bittul Mekach? Again, is it forever according to the Rabbanan, or only within this small window of time? And the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here, proof from the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that Chazru l'divrei Chachamim. The Mishnah said again that they went back to the Chachamim when they heard that Rabbi Tarfon is giving the buyer all day to retract. So then they said they want to go back to the Chachamim where it's a small window of time. And so the Gemara says, Yamrit b'shlama Bittul Mekach l'Rabbanan b'chdei she'yir l'tagar l'krov. If you're going to say correctly that when it comes to Bittul Mekach according to the Rabbanan, if it's more than 1/6 according to the Rabbanan, the buyer only has a small amount of time. Ul Rabbi Tarfon kol hayom, and then according to Rabbi Tarfon, the buyer has more time. So then misham hachi chazr. So that's why the seller said they'd rather go to the Rabbanan because it's a smaller amount of time for the buyer. But the Gemara says, if you're going to say by Bittul Mekach according to the Rabbanan, meaning if the buyer is overcharged by more than 1/6 according to the Rabbanan, the buyer has forever to go back on the deal. So Amai Chazr, so why would the sellers want to go to the Rabbanan's opinion? But the Rabbi Tarfon, it's actually they're better off with Rabbi Tarfon's opinion to come mashvi lu'ona kol hayom v'sulo, because he's saying that let's say when it's above 1/6, it's considered to be ona, and the buyer has all day, but he doesn't have any further than that. He doesn't have forever. And to that the Gemara says, Bittul Mekach lo shchiach. Having a case of Bittul Mekach where the buyer is overcharged by more than a 6, that's not common. So even though there is a benefit within Rabbi Tarfon in that situation, it's an uncommon situation, whereas by 1/6, according to what the Gemara is saying now, as we'll see in Rashi in a moment, whereas by exactly 1/6, Rabbi Tarfon gives the buyer all day, but the Rabbanan say that the buyer only has a small amount of time. And Rashi explains that if you're going to say that by Bittul Mekach, when it's more than a 6, the buyer has forever to go back on the deal. Granted that Rabbi Tarfon would say that at exactly 1/6, let's say he agrees with the Rabbanan that that's considered like Ona, because when we said earlier in the Gemara that they were happy at exactly 1/6 because the Rabbanan considered that to be Ona, but Rabbi Tarfon considers that Mechila, Rashi now says Shinuya Dechika Have. That actually was a forced answer, Mishum Simcha Demei Kara, because we had a question, why were they happy in the first place? The Kashalan B'mai Samcha, we asked why were they happy? V'hashta Amrit Li De Simcha Mei Kara Mishum Bittul Mekachi. But now we're saying that the reason why they were happy was actually because of Bittul Mekach, the Havoy De L'Rabbanan Liolam, because you're saying according to the Rabbanan Bittul Mekach, the buyer has forever. Ul Rabbi Tarfon Hayu Svurim B'chdei She'yira, and Rabbi Tarfon, they thought that he holds that you only have a very short amount of time to show it to the merchant, Kidin Ona De Rabbanan, like the halacha of Ona by the Rabbanan. You just have the buyer has a very short amount of time. Ki hadar amar lu kol hayom. Now, if he then says to them that it's not a short amount of time, but he actually has all day, akati simchika, still they should be happy with Rabbi Tarfon. To Rabbanan liolam, because according to Rabbanan, the person has forever. Ul Rabbi Tarfon kol hayom v'sulo. According to Rabbi Tarfon, it's all day, but nothing more than that. V'imi shom shesus atzma. Now, if you're going to say it exactly 1/6, to Rabbanan b'chdei she'yira, that according to the Rabbanan, the buyer has a short amount of time. Ul didei kol hayom. And according to Rabbi Tarfon, he has all day. Harbehu shevach shemashbiach Rabbi Tarfon, but the improvement that Rabbi Tarfon gives is great. B'yeser al shasus, when let's say it's an overcharge of more than a 6, there's this great benefit to going like Rabbi Tarfon, because again, mi pagam shepogem b'shasus atzmo, even though there's a little bit of a detriment in the situation where it's exactly a 6th, sharei yichon lizor b'shasus atzmo, because they could just be careful not to do exactly 1/6. Yifchesu loma, just do a little bit less than 1/6, utei mechila, and then it will be a case of mechila. Nimsu mistakron b'shal Rabbi Tarfon kolona sheyeser al shasus. It comes out that there's this great advantage within Rabbi Tarfon, any ona that's greater than 1/6. And the Gemara then says, well, that's not such an advantage because Bittul Mekach lo shchiach, because greater than 1/6, Bittul Mekach is not actually that common. And so therefore this advantage within Rabbi Tarfon that the buyer doesn't get forever, but that's not such a common case. They don't care about something that's not common, even though it's a little bit of a benefit. and even if it does happen, Rabbi Tarfon still gives the person the entire day. He gives the buyer all day, lachzor, to retract. Most people who do retract do it during that day. Therefore, they feel the detriment by exactly 1/6 is something that's more important to consider for them. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Hilchasa, the halacha is, Pachos mishasus nikna mekach, that if it's less than 1/6, so then the sale goes through. Yoser al shasus, if it's more than 1/6, the bittul mekach, so then we say that the sale is nullified. Shasus, if it's exactly 1/6, so kanu machzerona, so then the sale goes through, but then the person has to return the extra that he charged. Let's say the seller overcharged by exactly 1/6, he has to return that to the buyer. And in both situations, meaning in both a situation where it's an overcharge by more than 1/6, or if it's an overcharge by exactly 1/6, the amount of time that you have is just that short amount of time for the buyer to show the item to a merchant or to his relative. And the Gemara says, Tanya Kavase de Rava, we have a brisa that supports Rava. Ona pachos mishasus nikna mekach, if it's ona less than 1/6, the sale goes through. Yeser al shasus batal mekach, if it's more than 1/6, the sale is cancelled. Shasus, if it's exactly 1/6 overcharge, kana umachzer ona, so then the sale goes through, but the extra has to be returned. Divrei Rabbi Nosson, that's the opinion of Rabbi Nosson. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi is going to say, like we mentioned in the previous Amud, that yad mocher al holyona, that the hand of the seller actually has the upper hand, meaning to say, if it's exactly 1/6 against the seller has the upper hand. Rodsa omer lo tainli mech, if he wants, he can say, give me back what I sold you. O tainli mashani sani, or he can say, give me the amount that, again, let's say it's a case where the seller, the ono was against the seller, so he sold it for too little, so he can say to the buyer, you have to give me that extra. And in both situations, the person just has the amount of time where he can show it to the merchant or to his relative. And Rashi explains, Shasus, if it's exactly 1/6 according to Rava, Kana, then the sale goes through, nobody can go back on the sale. However, the Ona itself has to be returned. And Rava does not hold that the person that the Ona was against, he has the upper hand. That's what the Mishnah says later on. We mentioned that earlier. Rather, like Rabbi Nosson de Brisa. Rather, Rava holds like Rabbi Nosson of the Brisa. The Kaimalon Rabbi Nosson Daina, who we've established that Rabbi Nosson is considered a judge. And he went down to the depths of the halacha, and therefore Rava holds like Rabbi Nosson. And Rashi continues, Yad mocher al ha'elyona, this is Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's opinion, that by a case of Ona, the mocher has the upper hand, im nisana mocher, if the Ona is against the mocher, v'uadin im nisana lokeach, yad lokeach al ha'elyona, and let's say that's the lokeach that the Ona is against, so then the lokeach will have the upper hand, v'achim mukminan lo lekamon, that's what we're going to say later on, my deshayr b'mas nisan, tani b'braisa, the scenario that was left out of the Mishnah, that's what we have in the Braisa, meaning to say, it's true by both of the mocher and the lokeach. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Ad masai muter lahachzer v'chulu. How long does the buyer have? He just has the amount of time to show it to a merchant or to his relative. Amar of Nachman says, Lo shanu ela lokech. This halach is only true by the buyer. Avol mocher liolam chozer. But the seller actually has forever to go back on the deal. The Gemara says, Name a Messiah. We should say it's support to this. Chazru ledivrei chacham. Again, it says that the sellers, they went back to what the chachamim said. When they heard Rabbi Tarfon say that the buyer has all day, they wanted to go back to the chachamim's position. So he now, if you're going to say that the whole discussion had to do with the buyer, but by the sellers they always have forever, so then that would make sense. And Rashi explains, Lo shanu b'chtei shayira, this halacha that the buyer only has that short amount of time is ela lokech, it's only by the buyer. Shemecho biyado v'yachol laharos. The point is, he has the item in his hand so he can show it to people. But mocher, by the seller, she'ein biyado malaharos, he can't show the item to anyone, he doesn't have it anymore. V'limalech, they can't make the decision in that way. Eino makir bona, so he doesn't realize that it was ona, until he finds another talis, another object, like the one he sold, Nimkaros B'dam Yakarim, and then he sees it's being sold for much more. Hilkach liolam chozer. Therefore, the seller, he has forever to go back. Im lo yisakru talisos bentayim. If the talisos don't go up in value, once the talisos already go up in value, so then there's nothing really the mocher can do because he can't make that determination. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph.